Kris Krohn here with Limitless TV. Today we're talking about compounding interest, and we're going to talk about how to make it super simple. What is compound interest, and how do you figure it out with one simple calculation? Hang tight. So we get it. Investing is required to get where we want to go. And that means that you need to have some type of rule to understand what investments are good and which investments are bad. Listen, you've probably heard me knock down 401ks, annuities, IRAs. Sure, they'll have their moments in quarters or even a year where they'll make 15 or 20%, but you've got to average that out over the next 20 years where they're producing negative and losing money or sometimes making 3 or 4%. And over 20 years, they're often only averaging 3 or 4%, which means they're not even keeping up with inflation. How long would it take you if you're making 3% on your money to double your money? I'm going to share with you a rule of thumb today, and at the end of this video, I'm going to give you a bonus for my personal rule of what I need that coefficient, that one number to be to determine whether I say yes to the investment or no. Because some investments, they're risky because they grow too slow. We got it super jacked up. We live in a world that's like, oh, if you're making more than 5%, it must be hyper risky. I'm like, man, if you're making less than 5%, you're probably planning on going nowhere with your life and never getting where you need to get to. So you're the risky one, dude. All right, that was a little wild for the morning, but my personal feelings on it. We got risk upside down. We want safety, and safety equals guaranteed broken, never gonna make it, you will fail. I'm going to bring it down a notch. Let's talk about this rule. What is the rule that we can use? Today we're talking about the rule of 72, and it's a quick way of understanding interest. Let's talk first of all compounding interest. Get money not just on your initial deposit, but you also get money or interest on the interest from the previous year, and that's why it's called compounding interest. And the math can get a little tricky for the average person. You don't want one of these complicated financial calculators, and I don't want to teach you crazy algorithms. So instead, here's the simple question. How long does it actually take for you to double your money? If you were looking at an investment on real estate, if you were looking at an investment on a car rental business or a trucking business or some gold, silver, precious metal purification process, I mean, the world is filled with investment opportunity. That's really the question. How long does it take for you to double your money? And I want to show you a rule to answer this question. It's called the rule of 72. Now, this is really simple. What you're going to do in this very simple equation, I would use a calculator, and all you're going to do is take what's the offered interest rate, what's the fixed rate of return, that's on top, and I'm going to divide it underneath by 72. It's weird, don't ask me why, it's just the number, because if you'll take the fixed rate and you'll divide it by 72, it'll always tell you the length of time that it will take to double your investment. For example, let's say that I was earning a 10% return on my investment. Well, 10% compounding divided by 72, 10% divided by 72 is going to equal 7.2 years. It'll take me 7.2 years for me to double my money. Let's take $10,000 and you're making 10% on it and it's compounding. So 7.2 years later, $10,000 will become $20,000. 7.2 years later, 20,000 become 40,000. 7.2 years later, 40,000 become 80,000. Well, it's now taking you 22-ish years to take 10,000 and turn it into 80,000. And let me ask you, can you retire on $80,000? No, I mean, that's usually just 1 or 2 years worth of income for the average person. But it does give you a concept now of, oh, how do I judge my investments and how do I snowball them? How do I move them faster? What you'll find is that the higher the interest rate, the more money you'll make. Now in this next segment, I want to talk to you about arbitrage. It's a big word, don't get scared by it, because I want to reveal my real rule of how do I take the rule of 72 and how many years am I willing to wait for my money to double where I will hit the trigger and button on yes, I will invest in that, or no, I won't. That's coming up next. There was a philosopher in the 1800s, J.B. Shea, and he basically said creating wealth is a matter of moving money from low yields into higher yields. Well, he was actually introducing a concept there called arbitrage. And don't get freaked out by this big word, but it's a good word to know. You can have a positive arbitrage or a negative arbitrage. Let me give you an example. Arbitrage, for simplicity, let's say that it means spread. Let's say that I borrow money at 5% and invest it in a vehicle paying me 4%. Well, what's the difference? Well, I'm losing 1%. That's a negative arbitrage. If I could borrow money at 5% and lend it out at 10%, that's a positive arbitrage, and that has a positive delta of 5%. So JB Shea, what he was talking about here, and with this rule of 72, it's all about managing your positive arbitrage. Whether the money is money you've saved up or whether it's money borrowed, the principle is the same. How do I take a little and turn it into a lot? Well, you want to create as big of a positive arbitrage as possible. Let's give you an example. Let's say that I have a home with some equity in it, and I can borrow it on my home equity loan at 3.5%, but I can invest it at 20%. Well, the difference between 3.5% and 20% is a 16.5% positive arbitrage. I would go into debt and borrow money all day long if I could get it working for me at that higher interest rate, as long as it had a certain tolerance of risk and it made sense, right? Nothing is risk-free in this world, but there's certainly a lot of things with lots of risk. So the risk needs to be relative to the reward. That's a positive arbitrage. Or maybe I save up $1,000 and you work with me on my lease option training, where I can train you everything about lease options so you can buy homes with no money. And let's say you do a deal and you make $30,000 and you're $1,000 invested in. Well, $1,000 goes into 30,000 30 times. That's like a 3,000 to 30,000% return on your money. That's a crazy awesome return as a 3,000 return, 3,000%. That's a really awesome positive arbitrage. Does that make sense what I'm sharing with you? Well, I said that at the end of this video, I would share with you one of my personal rules for investing. When I use the rule of 72, if I can't double my money in less than 7 years, I generally won't even look at it. Why? Because it's not a real investment. It's not a serious investment. It's not an investment that can get me where I want to go in a realistic time frame. The further you go out in your crystal ball, if you want to try and guess an investment 30 years down the road, holy heck, are you kidding me? Who knows what the world will look like in 30 years? Who knows what technology will do to the world in 30 years? Who knows what's going to happen? But if I can use my crystal ball to help me understand 3, 5, 7, 10 years down the road, there's greater safety there because I have more control on where I'm at and where I want to get to be. Doing things that are so long-term out and with low interest rates, or you use the rule of 72 and it's like, you'll double your money in 48 years. That's not a real investment. That's the riskiest thing you could do because who knows what will really happen in 48 years. You might not even be alive, but you're alive now. So make your money work for you smart. Just because you get a high reward or a high return, it doesn't mean higher risk. In my world, there's plenty of investing options where you put a little out there on the line and you have a great return coming your way. And it's going to kick the butt from the 401k market, the IRA, or the stock market. And that's what you need. And so that's how I would use your rule of 72 to gauge your investments, to gauge the time frame and how realistic your investments are. If it's not giving me a time frame of under 7 years, it may not be the most wise investment anyway, because a small amount doubling every 7 years for 50 years means that that small amount's not going to turn into anything big enough with compound interest by the time I need it. So do something realistic. And friends, that's how you use the rule of 72. Don't you love having awesome, simple tools? Listen, you got another one right now in your tool belt so you can look at your investment opportunities through a different lens to now ask yourself, is this a realistic way to get where I want to go? Thanks for watching today. I certainly appreciate you. And be sure to subscribe if you want to get more powerful information like this on a daily basis.